just a little glitch. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I did, is I just minimized it and then I stuck it in the top.
What we need to do, if we, in order to get it recorded on the program, is we need to share the screen, and we need to share it with these issues. Okay, now we need to go to there, and then we need to go to let's go over here. I'm going to go back a couple just so they get documented. Okay. Ready?
All right. Perfect. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I said that cardiovascular disease is the most common cause of death. It's actually, here in the United States and in many parts of the world. But what causes cardiovascular disease? Poor diet or poor dietary choices is the #1 cause of premature death and disability. And if cardiovascular disease is the #1 cause of death, diet is the #1 preventable cause of cardiovascular disease. If you can't read this little cartoon says, I love bacon. Sometimes I eat it twice a day. It helps take my mind off these terrible chest pains I keep getting. So again, if this was there we go. If we were going to take a test at the end of this, I guess point number 2 would be, if you had to name the major causes of cardiovascular disease, you only have to remember 2 things: saturated fat and cholesterol. Okay, and I'm going to go on to actually 3 things: inflammation. But saturated fat and cholesterol are related. Saturated fat is a direct inflammatory factor, and the worst damage it's done to your body after eating a meal that's high in saturated fat within about 4 hours. So let's say you have a McDonald's egg and sausage biscuit thing. I don't even know what they're called, for breakfast. Your levels of inflammation in your body due to the saturated fat that's in that food is incredibly high in the next 4 hours. And then what happens 4 hours after you eat breakfast? You eat lunch. And then you have your deli meat and cheese and mayonnaise sandwich on white bread. And then maybe a side of French fries. And then what happens over the next 4 hours? Your body's taking another direct inflammatory hit. And then what happens about 4 to 6, 7 hours after lunch is you eat dinner. And you repeat this process over and over and over again. So if you think about it, an easy analogy is if you injure your knee and your knee is swollen and inflamed, there's a lot of inflammation, it's swollen, it's injured, and you take some anti-inflammatory, some ibuprofen, but you keep injuring it multiple times throughout the day, and you just keep taking anti-inflammatories, you're not really healing the problem. You're continuing to just directly insult your knee and cause damage and eventually permanent harm to your knee if you keep injuring it instead of removing the insult, which is hitting it, or however you injured it. Please, you can ask questions anytime.
You're not just talking about aches and pains and joints, but also the inflammation of our organs.
When I'm talking about inflammation, I am talking about inflammation, inflammatory factors, and cells that actually circulate throughout your bloodstream. And yes, they then affect your end organ, and especially the lining of your arteries. So, was that the next slide?
Yeah.
So our body has some wonderful defense mechanisms against insults like this through our diet. And one of the most important ones is nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a wonderful, wonderful substance. If any of you have ever taken yourself or known somebody who's needed nitroglycerin for angina, for chest pain, they take a nitroglycerin and they put it under their tongue, or they do a little spray under their tongue. It dilates your arteries and that helps relieve the angina that's due to blockages in your heart arteries. It decreases the stickiness of blood cells, especially platelets. It decreases inflammation in the endothelium, which is the lining of your arteries. It decreases plaque formation. That's that crud, that sludge that clogs up your arteries. It decreases smooth muscle formation, which is a type of like scar tissue that can further constrict your blood vessels. We have endothelial progenitor cells, which help heal the lining of our blood vessels. HDL, which is we call our good cholesterol, helps remove cholesterol from the endothelial cells to bring back to the liver. And then short chain fatty acids, I'm going to get to talk about this a little bit more later on in this presentation. It is a wonderful, wonderful substance that is formed when you combine fiber from your food plus a healthy gut flora. You need both of those to get these wonderful chemicals called short chain fatty acids. And so if we eat a whole food plant-based diet, this will help our bodies heal and help ourselves. Yep, thanks. There we go. Okay, so can you play the video? So this is a Michael Greger video. I think many of you are familiar with Dr. Michael Greger, who is one of the founding fathers of lifestyle medicine, and has written several books, How Not to Die, How Not to Age, that sort of thing. So you're going in the wrong direction. There we go, stop. Right there, click on that. Anyway, he has many short videos that you can watch on his website, nutritionfacts.org. And this is probably hands down one of my favorite ones. It's really interesting. Arterial acne. There we go. Okay, so yeah.
The plaques in our coronary arteries, which can eventually burst, shut off our heart's blood supply, and kill us, are more aptly described as pimples, not plaques. They are inflamed pockets of pus, and it all starts with cholesterol. This is a diagram of the wall of the coronary arteries crowning our heart. And here comes the villain of the story, LDL, the bad cholesterol, infiltrating the lining of our artery. It gets oxidized and triggers an inflammatory response. Your artery hangs a white towel out the window into the bloodstream, asking for help. The lining of your artery actually produces adhesion molecules to stick white blood cells called monocytes, zooming past, and suck them into the wall to try to repair some of the havoc cholesterol is wreaking. We never evolved to have so much cholesterol in our bloodstream, and it causes damage and inflammation inside the walls of our arteries. Other inflammatory cells are called into action, and it gets pussier and more inflamed, and turns into a big whitehead sticking out like a zit into the blood flow inside our arteries. The blood's pulsating past and can rip off the cap, and you get a big squirt of pus straight into your artery. Blood rushes into the hole and says, "Hey, we know how to plug holes," and forms a blood clot, also known as a thrombus, that can close off the whole rest of the artery. And then we have the opportunity to visualize a cross-section like this of an artery on autopsy, because you're dead.
Most people have no clue that in 2023, the
There we go.
Okay, so this is an example of a person who is having a fairly massive heart attack. So this is an EKG, and on this EKG, when a physician is looking at this, let's say a patient comes in having crushing chest pain, elephant sitting on their chest, they come to the ER, and an ER doctor like Dr. Charlie Ross is looking at this EKG, and he calls the cardiologist who's on call and says, this EKG shows that this patient is having a heart attack. It's showing tombstones on their EKG. And we use that term because literally they do look like tombstones, number one. And number two, these are the types of heart attacks that people can easily die from. So the tombstones I'm talking about are right in here. This segment right here that looks like a tombstone is not supposed to be there, okay? And it's a sign of major injury to the heart. An artery, usually going down the front wall of the heart, is 100% blocked, and we call these types of heart attacks widowmakers, because unfortunately, because men, especially at younger ages than women, tend to have more heart attacks, especially at younger ages, they would often leave, a widow behind because they won't survive these. So this is what we are trying to prevent. Okay, this is absolutely an emergency, and they need lots of medications and procedures, emergently. I want to talk about a couple of rhythm problems that you can also have. I teach you, sorry.
The computer has a rhythm problem.
Yeah. So I want to specifically mention atrial fibrillation, because atrial fibrillation can be prevented. There are some cases where there's a genetic component, but it very much can be prevented, and it's the most common type of arrhythmia. And so if you see the heart that's on your left, as this cartoon moves through, you can see that it's contracting in a nice, regular, normal, uniform fashion. Well, the other one on the other side is kind of chaotic. It's beating irregularly. It's not beating in a nice synchronized manner, especially those upper chambers. And AFib occurs when the upper chambers are fibrillating, and they're sending lots of electrical signals down to the bottom chambers, which are beating. Your ventricles are beating very irregularly and often very, very fast. And it can lead to a lot of problems. It can lead to congestive heart failure. It can lead to stroke. Can you move on to the next slide? It can lead to congestive heart failure. It can lead to stroke, because what happens when your heart, like the upper chambers in your heart, which are the atria, that's why it's called atrial fibrillation, they're quivering. They're not contracting normally. What happens to blood when it kind of gets stuck in the corners of your heart or in any part of your body? What does blood do when it's not moving? It clots. So what happens is those upper chambers, because they're not pushing blood through the heart and through your circulation in a nice, strong, uniform fashion, blood can clot in those upper chambers, and if a little clot breaks off and moves through your circulation, worst case scenario, and I've seen devastating examples of this, is when it goes to your brain and you have an stroke. So people who have atrial fibrillation often, not always, but often have to be on blood thinners to prevent that from happening, which opens up a whole host of possible side effects. You can imagine being on a blood thinner. So atrial fibrillation is very much a disease of inflammation. Like I said, there may be a genetic predisposition in some people, but in general, it's something preventable. It is associated with the types of foods we eat, with infections. We often see people have their first episode of documented AFib when they're in the hospital with sepsis. With alcohol, we have this saying around the holidays when people are eating really, really high fatty meals, high cholesterol meals, and a lot of alcohol. They come with something called holiday heart. And holiday heart is not a fun party term. Okay, it's a result of the party. They come in with heart failure and they come in with atrial fibrillation because their heart just can't take that kind of abuse. So other risk factors, high blood pressure, obesity. There's also a thought that if you have obstructive sleep apnea, that can trigger atrial fibrillation and other problems, in part because it raises your blood pressure and because your body is deprived of oxygen when you have obstructive sleep apnea. Low carb diets have been associated with atrial fibrillation, and it's thought to be related to the decreased intake of fruits and vegetables and legumes, and therefore you're not getting enough anti-inflammatories in your diet. And because a lot of these low carb diets emphasize protein, increased protein and fat have been associated with higher oxidative stress on your body, which also can promote arrhythmias. Okay, thank you. And then one other arrhythmia that I want to just mention briefly is a cardiac arrest, which is also called sudden cardiac death if you don't get resuscitated from it. And a cardiac arrest involves rhythm problems like ventricular fibrillation and ventricular tachycardia. You can see at the top here, this is a nice normal tracing of a nice normal regular rhythm.
Nice.
It's there, Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
So nice normal regular rhythm on the top, and then on the bottom is ventricular fibrillation, where if you don't get shocked out of this immediately, this will likely lead to death. Okay, and I bring up this rhythm, this arrhythmia specifically, because there are many people out there who have no prior symptoms of cardiovascular disease. They don't get chest pain, they don't have any symptoms, and they drop dead. That was their first symptom of cardiovascular disease. We've lost the chance to try and help that person to prevent that from happening because they weren't having any symptoms until something happened, usually a heart attack that closed off one of those arteries, and they go into this rhythm immediately, and they don't make it to the hospital. Okay.
Do you want to answer a question about a pacemaker from the audience?
Sure.
Marcia, you can ask your question.
Yes. I'm wondering if a pacemaker stops a heart attack.
So she's wondering if getting a pacemaker stops a heart attack. A pacemaker is used when you have too slow of a heart rate. So your heart rate, you're not feeling well, you're fainting, you're really short of breath, you're really lightheaded, and you come into the emergency room and you've got a heart rate of 25. Well, what's a normal heart rate on average? 60 to 100 or 50 to 100, something like that. And so you can understand they're not feeling so great if they've got a heart rate of 25 or 30. And then you put in a pacemaker, and that device helps prevent them from, it gets programmed like a computer. And you program it, say, with a minimum heart rate of 60, so their heart rate will never go below 60 ever again. So getting a pacemaker will not prevent a heart attack. It's a different mechanism. Now, heart attacks and valve problems and things like that can lead to you needing a pacemaker. So it's often an end result of scarring in the heart and scarring around valves that are damaged. Does that answer your question? Yes, hopefully. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then I just want to move on to strokes. There's two main strokes. One is a clotting type of stroke, like I mentioned, you can get with atrial fibrillation or due to plaque that's built up in your arteries and decreasing flow. And then the other one is a hemorrhagic stroke that's related to bleeding inside your brain. The clotting or atherosclerosis type of stroke is much more common than the bleeding type of stroke.
Someone was asking, does the pacemaker help with atrial fibrillation?
No, it will not help prevent atrial fibrillation. There are some people whose atrial fibrillation is very difficult to control, and we need a pacemaker to allow us to put them on a whole handful of medications to keep their heart rate controlled, but not let it get too slow. I don't know if that makes sense, but it can help with treatment of atrial fibrillation, but it won't do anything to prevent it. And then just as a public service announcement, I forgot I had the slide in there. I just wanted to comment that just like a big massive heart attack, if somebody has crushing chest pain, they need 911 needs to be called and they need to get to a hospital right away. Same thing with symptoms of stroke. The best time frame that we can help people who are having a stroke is in the first 3 to 6 hours. So as soon as you see symptoms of a stroke, and we're going to go through those really quickly, you call 911. Don't bring them into the hospital yourself. You call 911. Do not give them aspirin. Do not give them any extra blood thinners that you have lying around the house. Just call 911. Okay? So some of the symptoms is, if you can remember the mnemonic of be fast, balance loss, it seems like they're off balance. If their eyesight is changed, if they say it feels like a curtain is dropping over one of my eyes or both of my eyes, facial droop, you can have them smile. They should have a nice symmetric smile. If one side is going down and the other side is going up like this, that's not normal, okay? Arm weakness, have them fold their arms out like they're holding a platter, like this. And if one arm starts to fall down like this, or starts to kind of go like this, that's not a good sign. Speech difficulty, if they're having a difficult time answering your questions or they have garbled speech. And then the last one is time to call 911. Congestive heart failure is also another form of cardiovascular disease. It can be hereditary. There are some genetic markers that can predispose somebody to have heart failure. That is definitely the minority. The majority of congestive heart failure cases are due to other forms of heart disease, like heart attacks, like abnormal rhythms, especially fast abnormal rhythms like atrial fibrillation and atrial flutter, high blood pressure, valve disease, obesity and diabetes, and then, like I said, there's the genetic or familial kind. Can you show that video? Now, this is a video I found on an industry website. So I am not, I have nothing to declare as far as any investments or anything or affiliations with any companies. But I thought that this, okay, I can get it. I thought that this video showed that what congestive heart failure really looks like in kind of this little cartoon here. Oh, here.
The heart is a beating muscle that pumps oxygen and nutrient-rich blood to the body via the circulatory system. Inside the heart are 4 chambers, which collect blood and then redistribute it to the lungs and body. Several conditions can impair the heart's ability to effectively circulate blood. Defects or diseases of heart muscle or valves can cause failure of the heart to maintain an adequate blood circulation. Coronary artery disease, high blood pressure, or narrowed or clogged arteries can compromise the blood vessel's ability to efficiently deliver blood, thus increasing the workload of the heart. Any of these conditions can result in an enlarged heart with compromised function. Eventually, the failing heart cannot pump out the amount of blood that is being delivered to it. This causes pressure to build within the heart chambers and venous system, resulting in an accumulation of fluid in body tissues. This progressively worsening series of events is called congestive heart failure, CHF. As CHF progresses, swelling or edema often occurs in the legs and feet. Fluid may also collect in the lungs, causing shortness of breath. Eventually, heart failure may affect the function of the kidneys, further increasing fluid accumulation in the body, and causing additional work for the failing heart. CHF is a chronic condition with reduced life expectancy. In the case of valvular defect, surgical intervention may be required.
So I think that is the last I have on kind of different.
The heart is a beating muscle that pumps oxygen and nutrient-rich blood to the body.
So now we get to go to the fun stuff of how to prevent this, because a lot of that is kind of doom and gloom. All right, yeah, okay. We want to prevent all of this, and we have a couple of other cardiologists in the audience here, and so they see this all the time. We all see these all the time, and you can understand how discouraging this can get when you feel like we want to be there to help people who get sick. But gosh, it'd be so great if we could prevent a lot of this from happening. Okay, yeah. Yes, this would be great. Yeah.
What was the question?
If you want to stand up and stretch, or if you need to use the restroom or something, why don't we, 5 to 10 minutes? Yeah.
Okay.
So this is,
I guess that's earlier than, huh?
she apparently somebody needed to.
Oh, okay.
Somebody asked.
So, I don't know why it works like that.
Yeah.
Whether it's the,
I don't know.
because it's never done that before.
Well, and it could be this on your computer. Because it doesn't do that on my computer. And
I
it's
wonder if
easy to use these. On my computer, it's just easy back and forth. And so I don't know if
We could hook your computer into
Yeah, but
this,
how are we
but
gonna?
then they-
Yeah.
I have every one of those front notes.
Well, we'll listen to the second half. There's hope.
Yeah, but they just told me that I have from
Vascular disease. Yes.
some people I can't get on my headache and everything.
Yeah.
And I don't want to die.
You won't have to. And
I don't have these.
there is on a whole food plant-based diet, there are so many stories of people who were able to. They used to have to stop, like getting out of bed or walking across their house or walking into the doctor's office. They'd have to stop 3 or 4 times. Yeah. So yeah, going. The diet is really. We're going to talk briefly, very, very briefly about some of the other aspects of lifestyle medicine. The diet is by far one of the best things that you could do to possibly reverse the what? That's a chart.
You saw this?
Yeah, good.
Oh, did
Good.
you? Did you get me the cards that I left?
Well,
I gave you plenty of cards. So you
no, right.
can them out and not
So
worry.
there are very inexpensive
You
ways.
could do a
So if
randomized
she's doing that.
study, you know, you do
Convenient.
just whoever, every
Ways
second
that
or
you can eat healthiest
person, see if
without
they have
breaking the bank and
anything
without
that's
taking a ton
different.
of
And,
time. So,
you know, I have plenty of time
Yeah.
to
yeah. So in food stamps
come
will
here,
cover
do this,
it'll cover frozen
retire,
veggies.
you know.
It'll
play with
cover
kids,
cans of
fun.
beans, especially the ones with no salt added. It'll
Very
cover
inspiring.
both beans, dry beans. You can
Stories.
cook them though.
Our
Where's the
section in
fruits are
October,
absolutely on that list.
last section.
And we're gonna talk
It's
about
be on
that.
hypertension.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you would give her
Yeah.
story, it's the lady I told you. I might have told you. The one in
Mhm,
Idaho.
And I know that sedentary
Three
life, there are a lot of truck drivers out there,
Get your
you know,
affairs
they
in order.
don't
She sold
and they
the
don't
horse,
move much because they're driving.
gave away her horse.
Congratulations, that's so great.
Cholesterol
I
went
probably
from
told you that
240
you
to
can reverse the
123.
damage from heart disease, from smoking.
Think it was
You know,
50 pounds.
within
She's
lung,
like feeling
but
great.
lung damage, it can take years to reverse some of that, or at least, because you can reverse a lot of it. Now, I should say that if you smoke for long enough, there's going to be some irreversible lung damage.
Yeah.
You've already had, say, a heart attack
amazing.
because of smoking. Well, that's irreversible.
And
But
we
a
we
lot
would
of it
know.
can be.
We were
Yeah.
never told any of it.
Well, I'll give you some
I
ideas.
pushed so
some
many
tips and
pills
tricks.
in my
So,
life. No one
yeah.
ever got that.
Yes, you're welcome. But
Sitting and going scared. It's like,
yeah.
hard and fast.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's help out there, and it does take a support system, though.
No,
So getting
she gave it to a young
and also coming to these classes where you have
horse.
like-minded people is going to be really, really.
Yeah, I was okay. But her house was just in closing when I talked to her.
Oh, good. That'll really help. And they'll have some healthier food options.
Like, I'm dying.
I know they don't have.
Had 3 doctors tell me get
Oh,
your.
cool. Nice. Well, maybe you should think about it. They've got yoga drum circle. It sounds like it could be very meditative and very spiritual. If
I
that
don't
appeals to you.
know.
And there's a lot to be
You're
said
like,
for
no hope,
using
no
this
hope, no hope.
for stress management, which can help lower blood pressure, help lower your heart rate, help you sleep better. So I mean, like there's a lot to be said for
pretty good.
stress management and whatever works for you. Healthy ways.
But they may need to do something different.
Oh, no. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know what? Do you everybody has questions?
You know where else?
Do you have something?
And my wife looks over at me, do this. I was a regular 30%. Chicken. A little bit of a cookie, brownie,
Yeah,
anything that's in
I'm going to
there.
be doing a
I
prevention
just eat the
clinic,
meal. I
cardiology
never
prevention
said
clinic. Yes.
But then I went totally whole food
Yes.
plant
Well, that's
for
easy
my
to find
wife's
out.
sake, not mine. I was going to do this for a month for her because her dad died in his early 40s. So I started didn't have a second chance. Her mother and brother both had their chest cramp. So the bypasses and she was
Yeah. Okay.
going to be next. And I said, do you want a new life or are you willing
Yeah, there's
to
ways that we can help figure out if you have
If it's
AFib or not.
working,
But in the meantime, yet, but I will.
Charlie, you're muted.
Those studies are, they are full of possible flaws. There could be a lot of biases. There could be just difficulties processing the data because it's hard for people to remember exactly what they. It's some of the best studies that we have. And any time that you are looking at nutrition studies, you've got to understand that we're depending on people's memories of what they've been eating. Maybe they changed their diet somewhere in between, and that they've got the accurate information. You can imagine that when people don't know what medication whether they've received the study medicine or a placebo in a trial, it's really hard to do that with food. It's hard to blind you to eating a diet that's heavy in animal-based products over here and a plant-based diet over here. You're going to know which diet's not, right? And you could potentially cheat. You could say over here, well, I'm really craving chicken nuggets, so I'm just going to go down the road and get some. So it's really hard to do some of these studies. But we have a lot of epidemiologic data and other studies that really are pointing toward at least a plant-centered or plant-focused diet is where we need to be. And that is where we need to be headed. If not, an entirely whole food plant-based diet. And so when I talk about a plant-focused or a plant-centered diet, that means the majority of your plate is plants, legumes, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, that sort of thing. Whole grains, if I didn't say that, with a tiny little section for meat or eggs or cheese. Okay, a whole food plant-based diet basically means the whole plate is plant-based. There's no animal-based products whatsoever. Okay, so some of these epidemiologic studies that I have listed up here, they're really wonderful studies, and they got the ball rolling and how we started to think about what is it about these diets that kept people so healthy and living so long. So for instance, the Adventist trials are a study of mostly Seventh-day Adventist populations who are tended to be very healthy in baseline. Through their religion and their lifestyle, they promote regular exercise. Most of them, not all of them, eat vegetarian or flexitarian, which means they eat meat rarely, or they're vegan. Most don't smoke, most don't drink. And so it was a great great population to study because it was noted that they live a lot longer than the national average. And so in the Adventist studies, most of the other factors like smoking and alcohol use and physical activity all were pretty much the same throughout the whole population. And they looked at different people like, okay, well, this group of people are completely vegan. And this group of people are vegetarian. Some are lacto-ovo-vegetarian, some are pescatarian, they eat a little bit of fish. And they compared the groups and they found that as you became more and more plant-based, you live longer and more free of disease. The China Project and the Ugandan study, those are really important studies because they showed, especially the China Project, was one of the first studies that showed that lower cholesterol is better. And you can get that through a plant-based diet. And so what they found in the China study is that some of the healthiest districts in China, compared to some of the other districts where maybe they eat more meat, the ones that had the lowest cholesterol with levels between 120 and 150 or thereabout were in those which had a predominantly plant-based diet. And they were very rural. Okay. And so that is where we started to get the idea that maybe 150 is really the ideal level or lower for having your total cholesterol. And if you have a total cholesterol of under 150, that usually means that your LDL or your bad cholesterol is almost always under 70. Okay, so that was a really important take-home point from the China Project. The Ugandan study studied rural Ugandans. So they took 630 or so Ugandans who died of various diseases at different ages, and they did autopsies and only one of those 600 and some had died of a heart attack. And these were all adults, by the way. And so they compared them with autopsies of age and sex-matched Americans who had a very different diet than these rural Ugandans, which was very heavily plant-based, almost zero meat. And there, it was 20% of those deaths were from heart attacks. They were otherwise very similar. And so people who say, well, in the China project or the Ugandan study where they had very, very low rates of heart disease, and they were on almost entirely plant-based diets, they were probably dying of other causes. They were maybe dying of malnutrition or infectious diseases or something like that. No, I mean, these were people who, died at various age ranges and some quite elderly. They just didn't die of heart disease. So really, these were like some of the earliest studies that really were provocative in identifying that lower cholesterol is better, and that if you plant-based diet, you can have cardiovascular disease, or I should say the amounts of cardiovascular disease in populations that have almost an entirely plant-based diet, unheard of almost. Framingham Heart Study was also another study that really documented that for people who lived the longest, their cholesterol was the lowest. And this was at a time that was before statins. Those are those medications that we use to lower cholesterol. So lower cholesterol is better, and you can achieve that in plant-based diets. Go ahead, Charlie. Yeah, please.
On the plant-based, does it improve what health offer, or does it prevent?
So let me show you the slide, and then maybe I'll answer your question. So this is one of Dr. Esselstyn's patients who did a case series of 20-some patients, I think is what he started with, right? 20-some patients. And these were people who were on death's doorstep. They were told they needed bypass surgery, they had 3-vessel coronary disease, they were going to die if they didn't have something done. And they, or they needed something done, but they weren't healthy enough to even have the surgery. So they were, basically, like I said, at death's doorstep. And so he put them all on a plant-based diet. And not only, I should say, out of all of those, I think some dropped out, but out of the 18 that stuck with it, they had a minimal number of events, cardiovascular events, like more heart attacks and things like that, over the years that he followed them, compared to the people who didn't follow the diet, who had a tremendous number more. And so, did you want me to mention that book?
Yeah, it's documented in this book.
He has a book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. There you go. So you can read this book, and they'll tell you all about that study. And he went on to do this with hundreds of more patients and basically bring them back from, basically the death sentence. Here's a patient of his that he talks about. There's a great TED Talk, you can look it up on YouTube, that he does. And he talks about this patient who was a fellow surgeon, because Dr. Esselstyn is a surgeon. And he's a fellow surgeon who was told he needed stents for this very heavily diseased coronary artery. And he declined to get the stent. And so he came to Dr. Esselstyn and said, hey, I heard you're, doing something new and innovative. And so he put him on a plant-based diet, and this guy, he was dedicated to a whole food plant-based diet. And I think it was 6 months to a year later, maybe it's a year later, he ended up getting a follow-up angiogram where he looked at the arteries. And this is, again, before statins, before a lot of the treatments we use to try and lower cholesterol and that sort of thing. And this is what his artery looked like. Okay, so to answer your question, you can reverse disease. You absolutely can reverse blockages. Now, if you've already had a heart attack, there's part of your heart muscle that has died and scarred, and you can't get that back. Once those muscle cells have died, you cannot get those back. But you can prevent future events by just improving the blood flow. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into too much of these these plant-focused or plant-centered diets. I'm not going to get into too much of the weeds here, but all of these diets are great. Mediterranean diet has a lot of evidence behind it. It's a great, fairly heart-healthy, plant-focused diet. So is the DASH diet, which was designed to lower blood pressure, the portfolio diet, which was designed to lower cholesterol, and the MIND diet was to help improve brain health and prevent dementia. And go into the next slide. These diets they differ in like the amount of olive oil they recommend, the amount of whether they say it's okay to drink alcohol. The Mediterranean diet says alcohol in moderation is okay. They allow for small amounts of red meat or lean meat. The DASH diet really wanted to keep the sodium low, and all of these showed very positive end results compared to the standard diet or the standard American diet, also known as SAD. So these are great diets compared to the status quo. Okay, so don't get me wrong. If this is something, if you've been on a diet of a lot of fast food, a lot of processed food, a lot of heavy animal consumption, animal product consumption like cheese and meat and processed meat and dairy, other dairy products, and eggs, it's okay. These diets are wonderful and they do work. They're a step in the right direction. But more and more, we are finding that if you can start to really make it a cleaner, whole food, plant-based diet without any animal products and any added oil, and possibly even no alcohol, you're going to be doing even better. You're going to be doing your body a lot of good. And the two things, you can fast forward it to the next slide if you don't mind. The two things I want to bring up really quickly, oil and alcohol. Okay? If you are consuming either of these substances because you think it is going to make you healthier, you can stop doing that. Okay? In fact, there was just a study released earlier this year about olive oil, and it showed that you can lower your cholesterol even lower if you minimize olive oil in your diet. Okay, and this is on people who otherwise have other fats in their diet, like from avocados and nuts and seeds and things like that. Okay, so you can definitely do better if you cut out the olive oil. For me, that is a challenge because I love olive oil. So that's something I'm working on. So the second is alcohol. You probably heard, especially in the Mediterranean studies related to the Mediterranean diet or interpretations of the Mediterranean diet, that, oh, it's okay to drink alcohol. Look at how healthy they are in the Mediterranean and they live a really long time. But there were no studies that looked at the Mediterranean diet, for instance, without the alcohol. Okay? And they found that if you look at the study that showed alcohol in moderation was good for you, what they were doing is they were comparing drinkers in moderation, heavy drinkers, heavy consumers, which is definitely unhealthy, compared to non-drinkers. But in the non-drinker category included people who had stopped drinking for health reasons. Okay, so if the data was skewed because the people who were in the non-drinker category were already sick, some of them, to begin with, and so they had worse outcomes. So it made it look like if you drink a glass or two of wine per night, several nights a week, you're actually doing your body good. You're doing your heart good. And that's actually found to be. It's been debunked. That's found to not be the case. So if you do drink because you enjoy having a glass of wine once in a while, fine. But if you're drinking because you think it's good for you, you can stop. Okay? Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. Go ahead and fast forward this one. The portfolio diet is also, it's one of my favorites because it really focuses on lowering cholesterol. And it's pretty much a whole food plant-based diet. It really emphasizes a lot of fiber. So go ahead and fast forward this and I want to, just for sake of time. The one that I just asked Charlie to fast forward through, the point of that one was, and I'll just say it briefly, is that when you say that you're a vegan, for instance, all it tells people is what you don't eat. Okay, you don't eat meat, you don't eat animal products, but you can be a junk food vegan. Okay, Oreos are vegan. Nope, French fries are vegan. So you can be a junk food vegan, and it's been shown to be, if you have a diet that is, omnivorous diet, but does emphasize a lot of fruits and vegetables, but you're still eating meat and dairy, that diet's actually healthier for you than being a junk food vegan. Okay, so that's why we bring up the whole food part of this, because we don't want a lot of processed food. That's not the right direction to go in. So here, this is really what people want to know. Like, what should I eat? Tell me what to eat to lower my cardiovascular disease risk. So foods to lower cholesterol, lower inflammation, and improve the endothelial function to keep your arteries healthy. Nuts, Brazil nuts. There's a study shows that Brazil nuts can lower your cholesterol almost in the category of some statins. Now, you don't want to be eating a ton of Brazil nuts because they're high in selenium, which is an important mineral to get, but you can become selenium toxic if you eat too many of them. So it's recommended not to eat more than 2 to 4 Brazil nuts per week. Okay, not per day, per week. Okay, you can do 1 to 2 a day. It depends. I just recently read an article that it should be more like 4 a week or something like that. So I'll have to change my slide. 1 a day that's a good compromise. Perfect. Citrus, berries, blueberries, especially great for brain health. That was something that was really emphasized in that MIND study. They want you to eat fruit, but they especially want you to eat berries and especially blueberries. Raspberries, pomegranates, cranberries, acai berries, apples, purple potatoes, things with more color tend to have more of those phytonutrients, those special compounds that tend to be really good in anti-inflammatory agents. Mushrooms, onions, and garlic both have been found to lower cholesterol, green tea, green leafy vegetables, and beans. Go ahead. And then the next slide is some foods that definitely have some of the strongest anti-inflammatory properties, and this can be good. Remember what I said? What's good for your heart is good for your head, is good for every other part of your body. So turmeric, number 1, per serving size, has the most anti-inflammatory properties. I put it in my smoothie this morning. I put it in my oatmeal. I put it in just about everything.
What kind of form do you use? Do you use powder or?
I use the spice that you can get for really inexpensive at Mango. Yep.
What was the question?
Green, black, and chamomile teas. And then one of the strongest anti-inflammatories is anything that has fiber in it. Okay, so fiber is one of the most wonderful macronutrients that we can consume. So I had mentioned that wonderful chemical that helps keep our blood vessels dilated and healthy and is an anti-inflammatory, nitric oxide. Eating foods with high nitrate levels can increase the nitric oxide production in your body. And I want to just remind you, I'm going to show a video here in a second, I think the last video, about the gut microbiome and how important it is in combination with your nutrition in keeping you healthy. And it starts in your mouth. You have lots of bacteria in your mouth. And if you use mouthwashes that have alcohol in it, it destroys not only the back of your gums because it dries out your mouth, but it destroys all of the good bacteria that you need to start digestion in your mouth. And that is where The yeast bacteria, that is where they start to break down the nitrates in food to produce nitric oxide. So don't use mouthwash with alcohol. But the other foods that have high nitrate levels, arugula is number one. It's my favorite green. Okay, I love arugula. Swiss chard, kale, spinach, basil and cilantro have really high nitrate levels. Beets and beet greens, and then rhubarb. I love rhubarb. And then other greens or other types of butter lettuces that they mentioned. Okay, go ahead. So fiber, I love fiber. We are so focused on getting protein in our diet here in the United States. We are over consuming protein. We're overdosing on protein, and it can be really, really harmful to our health, and it can be an exacerbant to diabetes. So what we need to do is still need to get protein in your diet, absolutely. It's as important as carbohydrates and fats, but we're not getting enough fiber, okay? And so minimum amount of fiber is 40 grams, I think, per day, but it actually should be a lot higher. And if you look in the population, like I was talking about these rural African populations, rural Chinese populations, the amount of fiber in their diet on a daily basis can be approaching 100 grams. So one of the reasons fiber works so well is that you can eat all the fiber that you want, but if you don't have a healthy gut microbiome, it's not going to do any good. You're only going to get the good results from eating fiber is if you take care of your gut microbiome. And so it takes time, but you can do that and reverse the damage that's going on in your gut microbiome by eating more fiber. Over time, the really good gut flora, those bacteria, will start to thrive, and they will start to produce by breaking down fiber into short chain fatty acids. Have any of you heard of that book, Fiber Fuel? I love that book. Dr. Will Bolsowitz is the author. He's a gastroenterologist, and Fiber Fuels is basically about plant-based eating, whole food plant-based eating, because it's actually, I've kind of already answered this. Do any animal products have fiber in it? No. Animal products have zero fiber in it. You're only going to get fiber from plants. So that is why the book is really about a whole food plant-based diet. He goes into detail about why that's so good for you and what happens to the rest of your body, and how there's this gut-mind connection and how it prevents endotoxins from being absorbed and all of that. So he calls short-chain fatty acids, which are produced when healthy gut bacteria break down fiber, because of the most healing nutrients in all of nature. Bold claim, but I don't know, I might agree with them. Can you click on the SCFA? That's the last there, the last video. It's a Greger video. So Michael Greger is going to just walk us through the gut microbiome and why this is so important.
Check out this new video on the microbiome, and if you want
So, often the question that comes up is how long does it take to kind of develop a healthy gut microbiome when you haven't been eating as healthy previously? And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe Scott or Erin or Charlie, I think it's within weeks, is my understanding, is that you can, within weeks, you can start healing the leaky gut. You can start having more of the benefits from the fiber that you're eating. This slide, I just put it in there just to remind you that we shouldn't lose the forest for the trees. This shouldn't be complicated. This shouldn't be overwhelming. Like, oh gosh, I didn't get enough servings of legumes and nuts today, and it's not supposed to be stressful. If you try and focus when you're eating your full food plant-based diet on getting lots of different colors of the rainbow, including some whole grains and beans, throw in some spices to make it taste really good, you're going to be fine. Okay, this is not supposed to be overwhelming. Go ahead. And then we're going to be talking, and I think you've had some lectures on other lifestyle pillars that'll help with the with staying healthy, preventing. Yeah, I'm left-handed, so let's see if I can go over here. Maybe that'll help. So there.
Try this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna just, here you go. I'm just gonna finish up. So I think you may have already heard a talk on physical activity. Is that right? Yeah. And I'm going to be doing one in early November on stress management, or on social connection. Somebody else is doing stress management. Yeah, awesome. So it's all going to be here. Yep. And so these other pillars of lifestyle, that they all work together. Again, nothing is in a silo. If you're not getting enough sleep, you're probably not going to have a lot of energy to exercise. And when you're not getting enough sleep, we know that it affects hormones in your body that change how full you feel. Okay, so not getting enough sleep, for instance, can cause a lot of other harmful effects related to nutrition, related to physical activity, related to maybe substance use. Maybe you might want to resort to alcohol to help you sleep, and that's not a good choice. So they all work together. Okay, nothing is in a silo, and so you're going to get more information on some of these other aspects of lifestyle that can help you stay well and live a long, healthy life. And then I think my last slide is, you can fast forward that one, are my resources. I think this is really important because I've been talking for, I don't know, like an hour and 15 minutes or so. And that's, I mean, a lot of information, but it's most helpful when you get some resources where you can go and do some research on your own. I think most of you know Dr. Greger's nutritionfacts.org. We've got our book lending library down there. We have Fiber Fueled for borrowing back there. It's one of my favorite books, such a good book. But there's some other resources there also that you might want to check out. So you're welcome. Time for any questions?
Sorry.
That's all right.
The topic of the atrial fibrillation, you had mentioned that one of the causes of that is low carb diet. So I have a low.
I should say that it has been associated. They've noticed that people who follow pretty strict low carb diets, they seem to be having a higher incidence of atrial fibrillation. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it'll be 10 years for me having a low carb diet. I get all my blood work done and things like that. So I'm looking good, but I am always interested to see what does a low carb diet actually looks like in terms of preventing this. Does that question make sense?
So I don't know. So a lot of these diets have been designed for weight loss, okay? And a lot of them work. They all work actually, short term. But because of some of the nutritional deficiencies that come from them, and the fact that if you don't stay on the, paleo or the keto or low carb, whatever low carb diet you're on, then you tend to gain back the weight. They're not usually sustainable. And so what I think we all need to remember is that there's carbs and there's carbs. A plant-based diet's very high carbs, but they're all complex carbs, and their high part of carbs is fiber. So if you have a good ratio of carbohydrates to the to the part that's fiber, you know, you're slowing your absorption of calories. You are increasing micronutrient absorption. You are lowering your insulin spikes and your blood sugar spikes. So the carbs that we want to avoid are those processed carbs: white flour, white rice, white sugar, sugar in general. Anything where you look at the list of ingredients and it's got stuff on there that you don't recognize as a food. So term health benefit, I wouldn't recommend it.
And then if you're worried about low carb diets and heart disease specifically, there was a really good study done out of Sweden. It was a 5-year study, and they took patients that all the patients in the study had previous heart attacks, heart events, so they were known heart disease patients. And one group was on an animal-based low carb diet that was just on a standard, the recommended diet from American Heart Association, essentially. And it showed that the people that were on low carb animal-based low carb diet had a 51% increased risk of death from a heart attack and stroke after 5 years. So it's it's not recommended. Dr. Greger has a video of a study where they showed the blood flow in the heart after a year of a low carb diet. It decreased the blood flow in the heart on the low carb diet, and improved the blood flow in the heart on the plant-based diet. So yeah, definitely not a healthy diet to sustain health.
Yeah, that's great. And so it makes a lot of sense based on what we've been talking about. You want to get your body to really accelerate its production of nitric oxide, and you're not going to really get that from a low carb diet. You want those plants, that fiber, all of those greens that I mentioned. You want to be getting those in. Those are all carbs. So.
And referring to the upcoming class schedule, we have the updated class schedule on the plantbasedproviders.com website. So on the homepage there, it goes through like November 15th. We have the schedule out, so you can check that out. Well, the recording of the classes are always on the website, so you get to watch them. Not the slides, no. Yeah. Other questions?
Yeah, hey.
Listening to your story triggered this question for me. Are there any incidents or studies of people who are known to eat a lot of animal products, but they're living in places where they're not eating refined foods and sugar and, that kind of thing? What happens?
Eskimo, they live a shorter lifespan.
Yeah, the Eskimos about the only, is they could say, okay, do we have any populations of people that kind of keto-ish, right? And it's the Inuit Eskimos, because like good 9 or 10 months out of the year, they're living on seal meat and whale blubber because they don't have anything else. And they're not so good. So they have a lot of diabetes, osteoporosis, short life, it's not very good. But then there's a part of the year they get some roots and tubers and some things. But that's the only kind of population example we have.
Well,
Well, Maddie, I don't know how old that particular data was, but it's just kind of population study. We don't really have, there's not really good data on long-term low carb other than like 5 years.
So, and yeah, I don't think this really answers your question, but we have a lot of observational studies that have looked at people who have moved from countries where they have traditionally had a plant-based diet, which is higher carb, higher complex carbs, and they moved to the US, they've immigrated, okay? And they've started to take on the standard American diet, and they've developed all of the health problems that we have here. And, it's not necessarily a paleo diet, it's but it's definitely more meat heavy, so.
Yeah. Beans.
Yeah.
There are so many variety of beans. And so is any variety of bean okay, or certain kinds you should or shouldn't have?
So I would definitely emphasize, like in the portfolio diet for lowering cholesterol, soy-based foods are highly recommended. But basically just do a variety. I don't just do chickpeas, do chickpeas and black beans and kidney beans. Do a 3-bean chili, and you could have pinto beans, black beans, and kidney there. So just do a variety. Soybeans tend to have a lot of properties, but you need to have a variety of everything. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah, Saturday, November 2nd at noon, we're gonna have a potluck here. So more information will come out about that. And keep an eye on the Gene Plant-Based Providers website for the upcoming events. We'll have it posted there, more details very soon to that. And then let's see, next week I'm doing nutritional myths, and then the week after that, 2 weeks from tonight, is movie night. Show that it would be it's the Eating You Alive. It's a pretty positive one. Lots of medical providers talking in it. It is available on YouTube, but it's fun to get together. I don't know, we'll have access to popcorn maybe or something with some nutritional yeast and water spray bottles, so the nutritional yeast will stick to it. We can chow in.
I can stick around for a couple of minutes if anybody has any other questions.
Thanks, Kristin.
On your way out, if you want to grab a little snack treat, you're welcome. If you want to help put some chairs away first, that would be helpful. Yeah. Yeah. We haven't had the feedback. It was fine. Of course, there's enough. There's enough. Okay, they are. They're worth waiting for. Yes. These are sesame. They are date and cashew. There's enough for everyone. Yeah, you want to try one. They're date, cashew, sesame. So you may want to try a date, cashew, sesame. Maybe not. You don't eat this stuff probably.
No, they're really good.
Date, cashew, sesame. Okay, yeah. Take care. You're very welcome. I will tell her. Yeah, try one on the way out. They're a little cool, but you're welcome. Okay. These are date, cashew, sesame. Kristine's recipe. Good deal. Feel free. Date, cashew, and sesame seed. Wow, thought you forgot to record.